What actually is Previs? Previsualization, or Previs, in film production is the process of creating rough, visual representations of scenes before they are shot. It serves as a planning tool that allows filmmakers to experiment with different aspects of a scene, such as camera angles, lighting, composition, and timing. Previs can range from simple storyboards to more sophisticated 3D animations. The main purpose of Previs is to help directors, cinematographers, and other key crew members to visualize complex sequences, ensuring that everyone involved has a clear understanding of the director's vision before production begins. It also helps in identifying potential issues, saving time and resources during the actual shoot. In summary, previsualization is an essential stage that helps to translate the script into visual form, providing a blueprint for the production process. An example of the use of Previs is in James Cameron's Avatar, where the film's groundbreaking 3D visuals and extensive use of motion capture were heavily pre-visualized to ensure that Cameron's vision was fully realized. The studio Third Floor Inc. also worked in Previs on the film Avengers Endgame to plan out the film's numerous action sequences, particularly the climactic end battle. This helped coordinate the integration of live action footage with CGI. In my previous personal project, I tried to recreate a scene from Extraction 2 by reverse engineering a one-shot sequence in Previs in order to make my own pipeline and to be able to nail down the techniques used in Unreal Engine filmmaking for Previs. I always knew that I wanted my next project to be something more creative based, where I would make my own shots and story instead of copying a film, which is why I used my previous project as a stepping stone to not be burdened with figuring out too much the technical stuff while creating. World War II and Spitfires have always been one of my dad's biggest passions. For this next personal project, I therefore decided to make a short Previs film for him based on that. In this video, I am going to show you how I made a Previs film called Wings of Retribution inside of Unreal Engine 5. I first started by watching loads of documentaries about World War II aerial combat in order to have a good idea of what was possible in terms of movements the planes would do when dogfighting. I also did extensive research on Big Week and bombings in the north of France. In order to find a suitable location for my film, I looked up various old German airfields and came across Wapplage Airfield. I recorded its latitude and longitude for further use down the line. I also paid close attention to how the airfields were disposed, what kind of planes they were using, in this case the Messerschmitt for the Germans and Spitfires for the Royal Air Force. After that, I did some thorough research in my dad's old plane magazines to look at various plane interiors, to be able to understand what each button and quadrant was for, as well as how the pilots were dressed. Then came storyboarding. The story I had in mind for this short film was fairly simple, but the difficulty came in how to show it properly to the audience. I started watching loads of films to take inspiration on shots and to see how they edited their films in order to show the various emotions like suspense, intensity, fear, danger, action, sadness, joy, etc. My fear was that, since the planes are flying mostly over water at the start of the film, I would be breaking the camera's 180-degree rule and would lose the spectator's orientation as to where the planes were exactly, who was fighting who, etc. For information, the 180-degree rule in cinema is a technique about keeping the camera on one side of an imaginary line to ensure that the special relationship between characters and objects remains consistent on screen. While the rule is essential for storytelling, filmmakers sometimes break it intentionally for dramatic effect or to create disorientation. Top Gun Maverick and Dunkirk were of huge help as reference in order to avoid this problem of disorientation, as they both have sequences above water, so I paid close attention to how they were made by first of all just watching the film over and over, but also by watching various behind the scenes videos of DOPs and the directors explaining their choices in order to grasp a firm understanding of the process. An example is the use of sunlight in Top Gun as a landmark for the spectator. We can see in these images, for example, precisely where the sun is coming from, and therefore we can get a better idea of where they are situated throughout the scene, even if we don't have many special indications. I chose to do something similar with the sunlight, but I also ended up using the iconic Normandy beach to my advantage in several shots. I could finally make a storyboard once I knew all of this and how to show it. After that, I could start modeling and texturing the assets I needed for the film. I started with the characters. I first used MetaHuman Creator for their faces that I imported into Unreal. For their bodies, I looked online and found some cool uniforms from Call of Duty modding websites. I downloaded them, then changed their textures in Substance Painter to better match the colors and fabrics I had seen in World War II drawings. Their bodies were not rigged for Unreal. I used AccuRig, a free auto-rigging software similar to Mixamo, to get cool rigs that I imported into Unreal and merged the faces in separate blueprints, keeping the AccuRig and MetaHuman face rigs. I will explain why later during the animation phase. The MetaHuman faces, however, came with large busts that would protrude out of the clothes. In order to fix this issue, I went into Photoshop to create a black and white mask that I could use as an opacity mask in the face's material in order to turn the bust that I did not want invisible. I found a cool mask on TurboSquid and modified it in Maya, retexturing it in Substance Painter, then imported it into the character's Unreal blueprint, linking it to the head. Next came the different planes. I found a nice free Spitfire body on Sketchfab that I also retextured twice in Substance Painter, changing the numbers on their sides to include fun little Easter eggs. On the first Spitfire, I decided to add the same numbers that featured on the Spitfire my dad flew last year for his birthday, and on the second, I chose to put my initials as well as a part of my old postcode where I lived in England. For the Spitfire interior, I looked at my dad's old magazines and modelled one in Maya, mixing it with various quadrants and tubes I had found for free on 3D websites, that I then merged to the Spitfire exteriors I had retextured. For the German plane, I went through the same process, but the interior I found on TurboSquid. It was a free photogrammetry that I merged, deleting faces I didn't need. I spent less time on the interior because I had way less shots planned where you could see it, so that's why I could save time on this project, honestly. I imported the planes into Unreal in two separate pieces, one for the whole body and interior, and one for the propellers, then merged them in the blueprint so I could rotate the propellers easily. I used the construction script to create a rotation variable for the propellers that I could then call up in the sequencer to animate the rotation of the propellers separately. Then came the layout phase. For the environments, I decided to use a plugin in Unreal called Cesium that allows you to use Google Maps satellite information for your world. This is why I input the coordinates I had researched earlier in order to find Waiplej. The satellite images are up to date, however, so there was no airfield. I therefore looked up an approximate location of where the airfield could have been and what it could have looked like at the time to figure out which assets I needed to decorate it and make it more believable. I made the airfield relatively quickly as I didn't have many shots for that planned anyways, and knowing half of it would be covered by VFX explosions, so I modelled some simple barns in Maya, textured them in Substance and found some decorative German World War II planes in Sketchfab that I quickly laid out on the airfield. For the sea, there were loads of Google Images trademarks on the tiles that I did not want to be present, and it was really flat. So what I did to counteract this problem was that I made a massive plane to cover it all up and made a custom material using water normal maps I found on the internet that I repeated in the UVs, creating blends for the various distances in order to make it lighter as the UVs repeat less and less the further away the camera gets. Once all the technical setup was done, I started animating. Since I had many shots planned, I decided to use a master sequencer in Unreal with all my different shots as separate level sequences that I could edit and move around easily. I decided to use motion capture just like my last project, where I would record myself and my dad using my phone and transfer that to the Cascadeur software in order to generate motion capture animation data that I could import into Unreal. The difference in this project, however, was that the AccuRig for my characters was not compatible with the Unreal Mannequin. To solve this problem, I used the new tools at my disposal in UE 5.4, that being the new Control Rig tool and the new Auto-Retarget system. I made a simple control rig for each character, then easily converted my Cascadeur animations to Unreal animations on my characters using the Auto-Retarget. I also wanted to try out facial motion capture in this project, just out of pure curiosity and to add an additional challenge. In order to do this, I used the LiveLink Face app to record the motion capture data that I could import into Unreal to convert to facial animation on my characters. This is why I had previously chosen to keep the MetaHuman face rigs for this process. I then imported all of these onto my characters in the sequencer in each shot. However, this is where I discovered that there was a bug in the new UE 5.4. Indeed, the software would crash every time I would bake my animations onto the rigs, meaning that I could not edit them in additive, which was quite annoying for many shots that I needed to be really precise. I therefore had to animate loads of them by hand, which took me a lot more time than previously anticipated. The plane shots were of course all animated by hand as well, so the whole animation process took me quite a while in the end. The motion capture, however, on the faces worked well, so that was a great success. If anyone knows if this bug is recurring or if it's just my software that I need to uninstall or reinstall, please do tell me in the comments. For the cameras, I did a mix of just Unreal cameras and the link between Maya and Unreal for the more complex shots. Indeed, Unreal as of yet does not have rigged cameras with separate controls for translate, rotate, master, etc. Meaning that it can be way more difficult to get a clean result as your animation values are all mixed up inside of one graph, which can get easily confusing if not done cleanly. Using Maya and the Unreal LiveLink plugin for the more difficult shots was therefore the more efficient solution to this problem. I also made additional camera shake blueprints to simulate plane vibrations as if the camera was attached to the plane, to make it more realistic and anchor the spectators more into the action or to add more intensity and chaos to the shots. Then came VFX. I needed to make a bunch of explosions as well as some bullet fire and impact sparks on the planes. For the explosions, I used Embergen to create some VDBs that I could import into Unreal as heterogeneous volumes. A VDB, or a volumetric data block, is a data format used in visual effects and computer graphics to store and manipulate volumetric data such as fire or smoke. In my previous project, I had made a custom material for the VDB explosion. However, something new I learned in this project is that the material actually already exists in the engine database. So I just needed to grab that and link the VDB sequence to the material and create an instance from that instead of manually having to create one from scratch. For the bullet fire and impact sparks, I challenged myself by creating some VFX using Niagara, which I hadn't really learnt before except for some snowfall, so this project allowed me to go more into depth with the nodes at my disposal. I followed Josh Toonan's tutorial that he had made for his Godzilla short film in Unreal Engine, and used that as reference to create my own stuff from scratch. I finally finished up by adding a post-process volume for additional bloom effects, but I did not go too much into depth as I already knew I wanted to add specific effects and compositing after rendering. I created some custom control variables to optimize my render times, just like I had done in my previous project, adding additional anti-aliasing so that I could already have something cleaner from the get-go before compositing. I then imported my shots in After Effects, where I did some really basic compositing to add little extra things like film grain, lens distortion, chromatic aberration in an adjustment layer, as well as some color corrections, additional color masks for explosions, and some heat wave distortion effects for when the Spitfire is bombing the airfield. I also put a slight vignette over the image to give it an extra old feel to the overall film, and to dirty up the image a little more to further reduce the 3D render feeling from Unreal.
Hey everyone, it's Fred. I thought I'd do a track breakdown of how I created the score and what I did, just to give everyone a bit of an idea. I had lots of ups and downs, lots of failed ideas, and then when I did kind of get onto an idea that I enjoyed, I just headphones on in the zone, so I didn't really have any space to get my phone out and kind of document what I've been doing. It was a bit of a whirlwind. I kind of finished the score in about 2 days after I realized which idea I was going with. Spent about 3-4 weeks kind of balancing ideas in my head. As soon as I had an idea that I liked, I kind of went with it and then finished the score from start to finish really in about 2 or 3 days. The main inspiration for the score was Hans Zimmer. I really love the score in Dunkirk, and Scott really liked Hans Zimmer's one in Rush. And so I tried to keep the score as orchestral as possible. I had lots of strings and horns, lots of live sounding drums, although I kind of programmed them all through MIDI just because limited resources really. Tried to keep them as live sounding and kind of massive as possible. So I did that with various reverbs and mixing techniques. The process that I went through, I kind of watched the film, made lots of notes, ideas, and then I kind of went in this design process, I suppose, or design stage, where I'm kind of just trying ideas for weeks until I find something that I really like. And then when I do find something that I like, I kind of run with that. The concept I kind of used for this was around the chord of E minor. It was a super basic score. I wanted everything to be almost repeatable. So I went for a really simple structure of the melody and chords. It's essentially just an E minor the whole way through, and it kind of changes to an F only when Tommy passes, and also it goes to a D every now and then, just to kind of throw in a bit of dissonance. I use Logic Pro to design the score. It's great. You can kind of just chuck the film in, you can record to the film live. I find my workflow in Logic Pro is faster than any other kind of DAW I've used, which is why I usually tend to it. I also think the stock instruments and plugins on Logic are great. I think the orchestral sounding stuff on the Legacy tab is great. I didn't realize the Legacy tab was so good until a couple of years ago. I was only using all the normal instruments, but then when you do click Legacy and then Logic, you feel like you double the whole instrument library. So something to bear in mind if you didn't already know. I didn't know it for a long time. The first role I had on the film was recording Tom. He came over and did the voiceover in my home studio. We did a close mic setup as they would be kind of in the cockpit with his mask close to his face. And then I did the vocal effects for Tommy. Scott also sent me the voice recording he did for his dad, for Gavin, and I did the voice effects on that and sent it back to him. So we'll jump into Logic Pro and I'll kind of show you how I did it. So the first thing I did was record Tom for Tommy. So for the vocal effects, I started with an EQ, just cutting out almost everything up until kind of 1800 hertz, because don't need any of that. I added 2 compressors. The first one, just kind of quite a modern compressor. Not actually compressing it that much, to be honest, but then the second one I used a kind of a vintage Opto one, slamming it a little bit more, and then added some distortion here onto it. So not quite a lot of distortion, to be honest. So here's how it sounded before. Let's just run through that. I'll use Gavin for an example. This is how it sounded before.
And keep your focus. We've got a job to do.
Then with the EQ.
And keep your focus. We've got a job to do.
I mean, the EQ does a lot of the heavy lifting already. It's almost halfway there. Then with the 2 compressors.
And keep your focus. We've got a job to do.
And then lastly, the distortion.
And keep your focus. We've got a job to do.
So that's how I did the sound for the vocals. I did that, for both Tommy and Gavin. The first thing I started with the score, I kind of do it with most scores I work with, is start with double bass. I feel like the strings are the most emotive instrument. You can kind of do any emotion with the strings. So let's jump into what I actually did for this. You can see almost for the full film, all I'm doing is playing E and D the whole way through. Super basic. Something that Hans Zimmer does a lot is just have really simple melody and chord progressions and just have it almost things coming in and out, things repeating. But simplicity is key. I actually went through a stage in this film where I was adding so much stuff, so many synthesizers, and I just got completely lost. I scrapped all of it because I was adding to way too much. So my kind of process here was simplicity. So you can start. It starts off with the strings, which sound like this. Just one long drawn out note, and then what I wanted to do is I wanted to introduce a sound for when the German pilot gets shown. So I've used two synths here. They sound like this together. So those two synths, they play every time it kind of goes to the German's cockpit. I wanted to have a running theme of when it pans to him, that sound plays. I remember going to the cinema as a couple years ago and watching Stephen King's It in 4D, and that was the one with kind of smells as well, and you could smell Pennywise before he kind of came out on the screen. I really kind of took that concept and trying to put it into this, so you almost knew when the German was going to be around because you could hear the sound almost before. When you see the German for the first time as well, I added another kind of double bass trill. So with both the strings and synth, it sounds like this. Also, the tuba joins in at the same time to give some low end. I wanted to also add a pulse. This is actually Scott's idea. We felt like the score was missing something, so I added a pulse, which is quite intense. So that's just a loop. I've also kind of put it in tempo, added an echo and a kind of a reverb. Let's have a look at the drums. So kind of there's two different drum patterns that I used. One for the first fight scene, which sounds like this. So that's just on a loop, but obviously you can see here some things come in and out. The shaker almost represented the clock, which Hans Zimmer used in Dunkirk as well. But I mean, that stuff with the pulse, couple synths in there as well. I used this synth here, it was a preset on Logic called End of the Line. And I wanted kind of, as I say, a running chord progression, which just changes when there's certain emotions. With this, which kind of ran throughout the whole, that kind of ran throughout the whole theme of the score. When the fight scene engages, the tempo increases as well. So here you can see the tempo of the whole film. It kind of starts at 120, it goes to 140. It has a quick dip when Tommy dies, then it goes back up to what is it now? 149. So not much difference, but you can kind of feel it increasing. So I also added some staccato strings and some tremolo as well. So they're all programmed in with MIDI. I also added a counter melody on the flute, which sounds quite nice. Doesn't really sound like something that would work in a fight scene, especially not something in a war fight scene like a dogfight on its own. But then with the strings, it kind of just works as a counter melody. I think it adds that feeling of hope at some point, because I think with its all horrible sounds and stress, I think that the viewer almost wants to, I mean, I know I do as a viewer, I want to have almost an inkling that it's going to turn out okay. So that's kind of what I did with the flute. A flute's a very joyous sounding instrument. So the first kind of fight scene altogether sounds like this. So that's pretty much it for the whole first part of the score. When Tommy dies, obviously the tempo changes and it goes to a different chord, which sounds like this. So because of the chord change, it completely upsets the rhythm of the score. If the score is kind of changing like this, and then instantly it goes to this on a different chord, you instantly know something's up. I also took all the drums out to kind of leave more suspense. Then when the action kicks in again, I used a different drum pattern. So my kind of process with the drums were to just layers on layers. So I mean, you can see there's a kick, there's toms, snare cymbals, there's a tambourine shaker, taiko drums, there's surdo, there's a small surdo drum and a big surdo drum. There's also some more low toms in there, timpanis and snare rolls and tin toms as well on the first drum pattern. But the second drum pattern I feel like was more stress inducing. It sounds like this. And those big kind of washes from the cymbals, really something that Hans Zimmer does a lot. So much stress. I also introduced the staccato strings again for this part, once again with the kind of the double bass playing the same process the whole way through. I also had a alarm sound, which is something Hans Zimmer did in Dunkirk as well. I feel like this is just a carbon copy of Dunkirk, but amazing film. So it has a siren which my friend Shy, which I one of my other collaborators with, I was kind of stuck for ideas. I wanted a siren, and he's one of those guys who I can go to and just be like, "Look, Shy, I need this." Gave him a brief that I want a siren. It needs to be in this key. It needs to sound like this, and he sent me the siren back, which is exactly what I wanted. I put it straight into the Logic project, and it sounded great. He also gave me two sirens, kind of a harmonic siren, although it's not that harmonious. This is also used for the shots of the German bomber kind of out wide in the first scene. So you can see it here when there are kind of panoramic scenes of the German bomber kind of going up and down, these swooping motions. I introduced it there as well. So obviously when Gavin goes through the smoke and the German looks to his right, he doesn't really know where Gavin is. So I wanted to kind of build some suspense in that part. So I've obviously taken out some of the strings, some of the trombone and the flute for this bit. I've also taken some of the drums out. I've introduced two risers for it, kind of a bleep and a noise riser. They sound like this together. Just when Gavin comes through the smoke, I've also had a bit of a drum fill, which sounds like this. When Gavin comes in. So with the risers and the drum fill together, it sounds like this. The score then continues on the same kind of melody all the way to the end, and then when it does eventually finish, it just goes to a long drawn out E chord, which you can see right at the end. So yeah, as I say, my process for this score was super simple. Layers and layers and layers. So all the drums are layered up, all the strings are layered up. I wanted it to sound grand. I also kind of used lots of reverbs and everything. So you can, like, if you see here, I mean, look at all, it's just EQ and reverbs usually. I mean, I think because a lot of the stuff I used were samples. I don't typically compress samples because they're compressed anyway, right? So none of the instruments I actually played were live. It was all programmed. So it's all just delays, reverbs, and EQs, really. I think I didn't really compress much other than obviously the vocals right at the start. I think working on the score was a great process. I mean, Scott seems like a bit of a workaholic. You know, he would respond to me in a matter of minutes every time I needed him and had an idea. And there was a couple back and forths of what we wanted to do, and I would send him stuff, and he wasn't quite happy. So I'm really glad with what we came up with. I'm glad that Scott, if I sent him something, he wouldn't just say, yeah, it's good. He would also say, let's make it better this way. So it kind of helped me elevate the score to another level, I feel like. Because the score was almost one scene the whole way through, I found it hard to kind of jam in everything I needed to. The other projects on this the other scores I've kind of worked on, the scenes were longer, more drawn out, so it's easier to transition to something. But this, it had to be quick, it had to be punchy, and I find the hardest part of writing a score, I find, is the intense fight scenes, which this whole score is a fight scene. So this was kind of a real test of my kind of capabilities as a score composer. I'm super happy with how it came out. I hope everyone else likes it, and I hope people found how I made the score interesting. Yeah, I hope everyone likes the film, and I haven't just waffled on my laptop for half an hour. All right, cheers.
Thank you, Fred, for the work you did on the soundtrack, and Tom for your voice work you did for the character Tommy. I couldn't have done this without you. I'd like to thank you guys for watching too, and I hope this video could offer you some valuable insights into what goes on in the making of a video like a previs or a short film. Enjoy the film.
Big week, February 20th to the 25th, 1944, marked a pivotal series of air assaults that I had the somber honor of participating in. As an RAF pilot, I vividly recall the coordinated bombings that targeted the heart of Germany's aircraft production, aiming to cripple the Luftwaffe. Each sortie was a blend of determination and dread, as we knew the stakes were monumental. We faced fierce resistance. Flak and enemy fighters seemed omnipresent, and the sky often felt like a cauldron of fire and metal. Tragically, many of my comrades did not return, their courage now etched in the annals of heroism. Despite the heavy losses, the campaign was a significant blow to the German war machine, marking a turning point in the air war. The memories of those harrowing days, the roar of engines, and the friendship amidst the chaos will forever be seared into my mind. Tommy, this one is for you. Love, Gavin. Keep tight, Tommy. We're approaching the Huns airfield. Stay on my wing.
Roger that. Say, Gav, how about a wager? Spice things up.
Just remember your training and keep your focus. We've got a job to do.
Affirmative. But are you sure? What if we went
No
double...
what ifs. We stick together. We hit our target and we get out. You got this, mate? Trust your instincts.
Shan't have to worry about my instincts, chap. Looks like we've got company.
Watch your six. Enemy fighter inbound.
I have eyes on him. Ready to engage.
I've lost sight of him.
The bugger slipped me too. Where is he?
Shit, he's behind us. Evasive maneuvers.
He's on my tail. I'll shake him. Let's see if this Jerry can fly. How are your wings, Fritz? Taking heavy fire. I'm a sitting duck here, Gav.
Hang tight, Tommy. Keep weaving. Don't fly straight.
I'm trying. I've lost control of my steering. He must have hit something. I need support. Shit! I'm not sure I can take much more. Everything in his fried. Carry on ahead. I'll get rid of him.
I'm coming round. Just hold on a bit longer.
Oh shit. He's closing in on me. Might have to put a hold on that wager, old chap. I think this is it. Ah! I'm going down!
Tommy!